Welcome to CPAC Now, America Uncanceled. Tonight we have joining us former White House chief, he's also senior partner at Conservative Partnership Institute, as well as the author of The Chiefs. Chief Mark, thank you for joining us.
Well, it's great to be with you. Sadly, it's a sad day, not an unexpected day, but with what's going on in Congress right now, it's really just a disappointing day because this January 6th committee is not about a real investigation. It's about a political narrative that they want to put forth.
You know, Congressman Meadows, Liz Cheney is a friend of ours, long-standing. Obviously, Mercy and I both worked for her father. I happened to walk in the other room and watch some of the debate and listen to her comments, and I'm just appalled at the fact that she is a smart person who's playing into this attempt to give some kind of veneer of credibility to a special committee that absolutely has no purpose, no legislative purpose, no real Republican representation on the committee. This has never happened before in our country's history. Isn't that right?
Well, it hasn't, and you're exactly right. It's not really a bipartisan committee the way that both Liz and Adam have already voted to impeach Donald Trump. They've been very clear on what they think is his qualities or lack thereof, and yet what we have here is really an effort to chill the communication between the chief of staff and the president of the United States. President Trump rightfully claimed executive privilege. I have consistently, from day one, said I would protect that executive privilege. And yet what we're seeing here today is that I have shared documents that have been reported on in a very voluminous way over the last 72 hours. Those documents were provided in good faith because I've got nothing to hide. President Trump has nothing to hide. And yet what we see is then they take those and still hold me in contempt when I made a very good faith effort to actually help the committee. But this is not about a real investigation. This is about a real political narrative. We see the Democrats really having another witch hunt. And let me be clear, this is not about Mark Meadows. This is about a president that they don't like his policies, and they want to intimidate every supporter, every person that was willing to stand up and say, I voted for Donald Trump. That's what this is all about.
You're so right. Has subpoenaed so many of these low-level staffers that were putting a stage together for what we would consider, a peaceful protest. We have our First Amendment rights, and there they go, trying to intimidate these young people, going after them, getting access to their bank records, their telephone records. It is nonstop because this January 6th committee is all about the destruction of anyone who supported Donald Trump, ultimately with their goal of trying to destroy Donald Trump. Obviously, you're caught in the middle of this, and rightfully so. You have cooperated with the committee, but now you're saying, I'm not sitting down for this deposition. Why is that the case?
Well, we continue to cooperate. One of the big narratives is they said, well, we're not cooperating. We're still willing to answer interrogatories, but yet what they want is they want me to come in. They want me to talk about executive privilege. They want me to talk about private conversations that I had with the President of the United States. I'm not going to be the first chief of staff that waives his executive privilege. It's not mine to waive. And yet what we also saw is kind of the way that they went about this, subpoenaing my private cell phone records while we were in the middle of working out an accommodation with the committee. I get this subpoena at my door for all of my cell phone records without even the courtesy of letting us know that. And that's the kind of way that we're getting repaid with that. I want to thank both of you for standing alongside of so many of these young staffers and people that are getting subpoenas. I mean, I know how it affected me, so I can only imagine how it affects so many of them. And like you say, many of them, all they were doing is doing their job. And yet what we have is the heavy hand of Congress trying to come in and pass out subpoenas. They've passed out more subpoenas in the last couple of months than they have in the last couple of decades. And it doesn't serve them well. They're trying to intimidate. Obviously, my fate goes to the hands of the Department of Justice, and I believe in the institution. So I'm hopeful that we'll get a fair hearing there. But yet, at the same time, they've kind of stacked the deck against us.
Thank you for bringing up our fund. It's called the First Amendment Fund, and anybody can contribute to it. It's a 501c3 project, and the attempt is to defend the constitutional rights, the First Amendment rights of the American people. You know, Congressman Meadows, we see it in all these forms. It can be teachers, it can be cops, it can be people who say they don't want to push critical race theory and they get fired. It can be people who say, I don't want to take a vaccine, and they can be fired. Wear a MAGA hat and put a picture on their Facebook page, and they can lose their job. And that's happening all over this country. So thank you for giving us a little bit of an attaboy on that, because from our perspective, this is the fight. And the fight on 1-6 is at the very center of it. People need to remember, you were their colleague. You were a member of Congress. You sat on these committees that investigated government wrongdoing. And they're told at this committee on 1-6 that people aren't even allowed to question the security decisions that Nancy Pelosi made about that day, that's off. That's out of bounds. This is outrageous.
Well, it shouldn't be, Matt. And let me just say this. Part of the real problem that we run into here is if they were truly a committee wanting to get to the bottom of it, the problem is many of the decisions that were made or not made, they didn't come from the West Wing. They came from other places, whether it is Nancy Pelosi or Washington, D.C. or somewhere else. But all they want is to bring it back to the West Wing. And I can tell you that no one in the West Wing, to my knowledge, had any advance notice that there was going to be a security breach at the Capitol. We can condemn that. But what we also can say is that we're for the Constitution and constitutional protections, and it certainly is Congress's ability to do proper oversight. But you talk about legislative intent. I think, Mercy, you were talking about this. Listen, I serve with a number of these people, and I know what they're saying is they've got legislative intent. Well, even their own resolution will not let them do a markup. So this is not about passing some bill. This is about passing on a political narrative.
You're right about the political narrative. In fact, this January 6th committee, reading their tweets, it's like reading the tweets of the Democrat National Committee. Basically, this was one that Liz Cheney said, these texts have no doubt the White House knew exactly what was happening at the Capitol. Members of Congress, the press, and others wrote to Mark Meadows as the attack was underway. She literally makes this allegation that the White House knew what was happening. So she's setting up this narrative in the media that then now you have to say, wait a second, we have to fight back. Like, this is not accurate. What do you say in response to that tweet from Liz Cheney?
Well, one, without me getting into the facts of the matter, because I'm trying to make sure that our attorneys litigate this properly. And as you know, we filed a lawsuit against Nancy Pelosi. What I can say this is the way that they're taking these text messages is totally out of context, and they're feeding that out in drips and dribbles. And we saw this before. I saw it come from a bunker when we had the impeachment 2.0, where they feed out a few things so the press will pick up on it. But here's what I will say is that when the call came in, the response was immediate, and I think that what the record will show with testimony, if they're serious about a proper investigation, it will show that not only did we respond, but we responded quickly. And the other aspect of this is, if they really want to make the nation's capital more secure, there are legitimate things that they can look at to do, but they're not focused on that. They're focused on everything but that.
That's exactly right. Congressman Mark Meadows, we're going to be right back after the short break. We just have a couple more questions to ask you. Hold on tight. We'll be right back.
All right.
Hey everyone, this is Matt Schlapp with CPAC, and it's my privilege to tell you that we've got a very important project that we've just announced, the First Amendment Fund. It's a brand new fund that we've created through our criminal justice reform efforts to raise money to take care of you, Americans who are being canceled and desecrated out there around the country. We know it just happened in Virginia, where parents were called domestic terrorists by the Biden administration, where people who just want to express their political views are canceled left and right. Now we have this terrible specter of a vaccine mandate where you can lose your job or be prevented from going to a restaurant or go to school according to your vaccination status. These are all the things that are happening in this country that are making people realize that America is in a fight to defend the principles that have made her great. If you want to be involved in this important effort, please go to conservative.org, click the link for the First Amendment Fund. Please donate to this C3 to help these victims across the country, including those who are just involved in politics, to make sure they have the legal representation they need to be able to live their great American life.
Welcome back to CPAC Now America Uncanceled. We are continuing our conversation with former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows. And I got to say, Mark, you know, as we were having this conversation about January 6th, where does it all end? I mean, we know the Democrats are using this as their only possible narrative right now because they're losing on every other front, whether it be the economy or on foreign policy or on domestic policy. And so they're grabbing on to this January 6th committee. I mean, that I think makes no sense to me. What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't know where it stops. I can tell you that they will write a report. That report will be certainly damning. They probably have already gotten it written. And so they're going to put out a report. They're going to try to time that report so that they can talk about that report in the lead up to the 2022 elections. And here's what we do know is they don't want to talk about the economy. They don't want to talk about gas prices. They don't want to talk about Afghanistan and the debacle in terms of withdrawal from Afghanistan. They don't even want to talk about really a supply chain in anything else. They don't want to talk about the debt. When you name it, there is nothing for them to talk about on both domestic and foreign policy. So this is all they have. And that's why they're spending so much of their time and effort, why they're so aggressive with it. Listen, I appreciate the prayers of so many people. You and I talked about this privately, but the prayers of so many people in our nation, and candidly, I feel those, and I want the people that are tuned in right now to understand that. This is today it's Mark Meadows. Tomorrow it'll be somebody else.
Right.
And what we need to do is stand up for those who are willing to stand. And for me, I can condemn what happened on January 6th, but I'm not going to be intimidated to shy away from doing what I should do, and that's support President Trump's executive claim privilege in a spirit of transparency until the courts have weighed in. If the court's weighed in, that's a different thing. But Congress is not the court.
Well, absolutely.
So let's get a couple things straight here, Mark. First of all, a lot of people are talking about how Adam Kinzinger and Liz Cheney are these strong conservatives. I know if I compare Congresswoman Cheney's record to your record, your ACU rating, I think, is at least 20 points higher. So let's just make that point very clear. Let's make another point very clear, that people on the Democratic side want to focus on the violence at the Capitol. Doesn't it gall you that we had violence all over our country for over a year, our cities being burned down, people couldn't go to their homes and open up their businesses, we have dead cops in our major cities, we had a lot of kids who were killed in all the violence, we have carjackings now at 45% because we defunded the cops in Washington, D.C., we have murders out of control every weekend, every week in Chicago. All of our major cities in these big blue states are literally breaking down and people are getting hurt. And the violence that was agitated by the left, by Act Blue, by Black Lives Matter, by Antifa, by all these big financiers on the left, where they were trying to drive chaos in our major cities, yet 1/6, we're told, is the epicenter of violence in our country. Why do they only condemn violence when it's on the right?
Well, I mean, sadly, what we need to do is condemn both the violence of January 6th and the violence that happened in Portland and Wisconsin and Minnesota and Seattle and other places. I can, in my book, The Chief's Chief, I talk about where the president was all in on that, about how we need to be against this defunding of police, how we need to make sure that our cities are safe. And so for a president that has been really strong on the rule of law and strong for law enforcement, we need to make sure that that's consistent. And we, that's one other thing the Democrats don't want to talk about. They don't want to talk about crime in these big cities. Even you got the mayor of New York acting like crime is non-existent in New York City when it's at such stages that, it's horrific, played out on television each and every day. And so we can condemn it all, but at the same time, what we need to do is, if they are serious about an investigation, let's look at it all.
Yeah, no question. I think that the Democrats are really going to try to keep playing this card and hoping to make all of you and all of us the bad guys, the evil ones, to make sure they can try to stop the Republican Party and Donald Trump. But do you think the Republicans are standing united, strong enough? I'm not including Adam or Liz Cheney for that matter, in terms of ensuring that they can try to stop this committee? I keep thinking, is there any way to just stop them from doing what they're, this political witch hunt, this focus on basically humiliating and intimidating individuals? I mean, you're tough, but it's been really hard on so many other of these individuals that have gone through this process.
Now, I can only imagine and how difficult it is. And so the Republicans are pushing back. It's tough. You're in a minority, and so obviously they're fighting an uphill battle. You try to do it on the merits of the case. Actually, my attorney put forth a very compelling letter on why I shouldn't be held in contempt, and I don't know.
You got a pretty good lawyer, Mark. You got a pretty well-known lawyer.
Well, he is a good lawyer, and they've got a great team. I think the real problem is that this has become so political that even those that are thinking individuals, they don't want to actually look at the merits of the arguments. And so we do need to push back. We need to understand that the power of Congress should be limited. Being able to do subpoenas and go as broad a scope as what they're doing is not something that we did when we were in the majority. It's not even something the Democrats did before we had the majority. This is a fairly new phenomena, and hopefully the justice system will weigh in and provide some guardrails for some of that.
Well, Mark Meadows, we're going to continue to raise money for these people's legal defense. I assume even someone like yourself, depending on where this goes, you never know, people might need to be helping you out too, but we want to make sure that everybody associated with this 1-6 committee has the legal resources they need to defend themselves. And I have this, as we close our interview with you, there's something hit me in the last couple of days as I've just been agitating over this, watching my friends be tortured in this most extraordinarily undemocratic process in the House of Representatives. I think this is impeachment 3. I think this is a giant opposition research attempt to find out any dirt, any text message that says something nasty about Donald Trump, find anything that can smear or slime that man or anybody who's closely associated with him as they wonder about whether or not he's going to run for president again. Do you think that sounds crazy?
No, I don't think it's crazy at all. In fact, it seems like that the things that they're sharing have very little to do with an investigation and all to do with Donald Trump. I mean, and sadly, we've seen it before. But at the same time, we're going to stand shoulder to shoulder on the Constitution and on freedom and on what makes our country great. And I believe that there are so many great patriots across this country that hopefully this difficult time will ultimately produce something where we learn a very valuable lesson to not allow a committee in Congress ever again.
I agree. Well, Mark Meadows, former congressman from North Carolina, former chief of staff to Donald Trump, author of The Chief. You're a courageous man. You're a great friend. And it's inspirational to watch you say that I'm not going to back down. So thank you very much.
Thank you both. Thank you for standing in the gap. God bless you both.
God bless you, Mark.
Thank you, Mark. We'll be right back with more CPAC Now, America Uncanceled after this short break. Welcome back to CPAC Now, America Uncanceled. That was a great conversation with Mark Meadows. It was a real honor for him to talk to us. In the midst of this vote on the floor of the House of Representatives, I'm just disgusted and appalled by what I'm seeing on the floor of the House of Representatives. A couple of Republican congressmen aiding and abetting this lie. They call us the proponents of the big lie. But this lie that somehow Trump and Trump supporters were trying to, destroy the United States Capitol, or somehow Trump and Trump supporters were trying to make lawmakers feel physically unsafe. What happened on 1/6, and I'm never going to endorse the violence that was associated with 1/6. I think that's wrong, and we should all call that out. I was out there calling out the violence of Black Lives Matter back at a time when you couldn't even say the term Black Lives Matter. And when you did say it, the penalties were high. We got to call out the violence in our society. But 1/6 is not about violence. 1/6 is about the American people coming together to say we got to have voter identification. We got to have voter verification. We got to follow these state laws on voting, which is what didn't happen. And our system doesn't contemplate the time that's needed to make the case and to prove the facts around all the illegal voting that happened around the last election, both at the presidential level and on down. The more I talk to experts, the more I read, the more I study, the more I feel compelled to present the case of what happened on the election of 2020. Up to over 500 million nonprofit dollars spent to try to get the illegal vote in all of these bins that they put all around these big cities in these states. This outrageous election, now the Democrats and the Never Trump Republicans are all bragging about what they did, but this outrageous election leaves this country incredibly divided. I don't know how we're going to get it back if we can't start leveling with each other on the facts. And the facts are, there's a reason why they spent over $500 million in that last election through Zuckerbucks and other forms. It's because they knew that because of the virus and the mailed-in ballots, there was a chance to really get people to vote who don't normally vote and who are not allowed to vote. That's what happened. And you could take this state by state and go through it. Matter of fact, I think it's awfully important that we, at the American Conservative Union here at CPAC, that our lawyers are going back and getting all of this FOIA-able information from all these lawsuits. It was never a question of could we prove the claim, even though there were some irregular performances by Trump lawyers and Trump associates. It was never a question of could we prove the claim. It was always a question of what's the remedy. And that's the problem that the country's in. Everybody views the last election as riddled with questions and inconsistencies and illegalities. More than 50% of the country and a lot of Democrats realize that. Now we have to figure out how we go forward with Joe Biden in the White House in this form that he's in, which makes people very nervous. And a lot of the country, more than 50% of the country, believe that the way we vote does not inspire any confidence. What happens with this? Do people decide to stop voting? Or do people decide to change the system? I'm hoping that we talk about the facts so that we change the system. And it starts with saying what the truth is. And what the fake news media has done is become an arm of the Democratic Party. How dare any reporter endorse what's going on with this sham 1/6 committee? We've watched our friends get subpoenas, be tortured, have to use their life savings to pay for lawyers, all because they're trying to run an opposition research, taxpayer-funded scam to find any way possible to keep Donald Trump or anybody associated with him from ever running for office again. We have to call it for what it is, and we have to be outraged about it. And you should call your congressman and your senators, especially if they're Republican, and ask them to go on the record this week. Condemn this committee. Condemn any committee in Congress that refuses to give a voice to the minority. This is still the United States of America. We all have a voice. It's not just the majority who rules. All of us get a voice in our government. And what's happening on that 1-6 committee is an attempt to shut us all down. And they did it when they called us domestic terrorists through the DOJ, through Biden's DOJ, and they're doing it with this committee. And Mark Meadows is a courageous man for stepping up and fighting it. And by the way, so is Steve Bannon, a courageous man for stepping up and fighting it. And so are all of our friends who are being subpoenaed, and they're starting to fight it. And so are all the cops, and so are all the parents, and so are all the healthcare workers who are not buckling down to the fascism of the left. This is a critical time in our country's history. We must stand up, and we must stand with each other and support each other. And if you want to help our fund, the First Amendment Fund, we'd be ever so pleased if you did. The money's going to go to this really important cause. And thanks for tuning in for another really important episode on CPAC Now of America Uncanceled. Good night and God bless.